kindly ask you to Everyone is talking about climate change. Governments are signing climate pacts. Companies are changing their business models. Change starts with every individual. Managers lead by example. That's why we asked CEOs of some of our members how they personally contribute to a greener planet.
Every degree less in-house, every liter less fuel consumed, using glass bottles instead of plastic.
Not using plastic water bottles, eating vegetable instead of red meat, walking or cycling instead of taking the car.
I have decided to buy an electric car. Our electricity that we have at home is 100% solar, so I am moving around using almost purely clean energy.
At home, we are mindful of our water and energy use, are careful to recycle our waste, and at the same time, we also collect all and disuse electronic devices to make sure that they're recycled correctly.
I personally started to go mainly composting bio-waste, which I was not doing before, but when I joined the company and see the mission and vision of it, I'm fully aware this is the right way how we can do from bio-waste new life.
Buy local products and brands with clearly sustainability goals and actions.
Firstly, with small action, water and energy saving, local food buying, choosing reusable packaging like glasses, and also we installed a solar power plant to power our home with green energy.
One of the things that irritates me the most is people that litter. So one of the things that I do not do is litter, and I especially do not throw my mask on the floor.
Climate targets can only be achieved through cooperation between business and government. Now let's see how some successful Slovenian companies are preparing for a greener future.
Over the last 10 years in Trimo, we reduced municipality waste for 58%. We reduced water consumption for 43%. And we are already using 56% of recycled materials into our products. Our products are bringing up to 65% of isolation improvement into the buildings, and our products are 99% recyclable.
Looking at ways in which we manage our buildings, how we travel to work, and also how we communicate with our customers, primarily through digital and paperless channels.
First of all, we are refurbishing our building, which we hope to make about 25 to 30% more efficient, and the project should be done by mid-next year. Next, we've decided that also starting next year, we'll purchase all our electricity from clean resources. So it'll either be generated by hydropower or solar. Next, we have given the opportunity for all of our employees to use car sharing, and we have set up a car sharing port right in front of our office building.
At PwC, we have made a worldwide science-based commitment to reach the net zero gas house emissions target by 2030. So first of all, we need to halve our emissions, and obviously through 100% renewable energy, to name one. We need to become more efficient in terms of our energy, and of course reduce our air miles. Secondly, we need to help our clients with their non-financial information and reporting to stakeholders around the impact that business has on climate change and other ESG topics. Thirdly, we need to up the ante, become more actively involved, globally, regionally as well as nationally, in those policy discussions.
80% of electricity that A1 uses for its operations come from green energy.
One is to use as much as possible recyclables instead of virgin materials, meaning polymers, and doing as much as possible bio-waste composting with our products.
From 2018 on, we invested more than 20 million in green technologies for glass melting. And our plan is that till 2030 we reduce our carbon footprint by 40% and going carbon neutral by 2050. Starting point, sure, with hydrogen implementation in the glass melting, and also producing the first most sustainable bottle in the world.
So think about what you personally can do for a greener planet. Good morning. Good morning, Your Excellency, Minister, distinguished guests from Slovenia and the UK, ladies and gentlemen, members of the British Slovenian Chamber of Commerce, and welcome to our Climate Change Conference after COP26, organized by the British Slovenian Chamber of Commerce and supported by our partners Nova KBM, Spirit Slovenia, Trimo and Triglav. If I go back to this video that we just saw, let me ask you, ladies and gentlemen, how many of you have changed your habits in the last 12 months thinking of a greener planet? Please raise your hands. So, about half of you. And how many of you have changed your business in the last 12 months? The way you do business, thinking of a cleaner planet, looking to a greener future? About 1/3. Well, looks positive. And I'm happy that you're all here today, live, and let me also welcome all our viewers online. We will not be talking about business today. There will also be some pleasure. So we have a Michelin star chef who will be preparing a Michelin star meal in the other room. So all of you welcome to stay until the end also for a Michelin star lunch. We're here to talk about climate change. We're here to talk about what happened at COP26, the big climate change conference that concluded 10 days ago. And there are people here who were at that conference and will tell you what happened. We're here to talk about what's next for Slovenia and what's next for business, for you, our members. So it's my pleasure to start with the first panel today. And it's a female panel. And I would like to invite on stage Ladea Godina-Košir, who will be leading the panel, and she is the CEO of Circular Change and the chair of European Circular Platform.
Thank you very much, Barbara. Warm welcome to everyone, distinguished guests. So it's a pleasure being here and to feel the energy, because nowadays we are most of the time behind the screens, but now we are on the scene. So thank you very much, the organizers and distinguished guests here, as well as those who are with us online. What we are going to discuss, as Barbara nicely said, it is about climate change, but this is the fact. So we cannot do anything to prevent the change happening, but we can do a lot in a sense, how to embrace this change and how to change habits, how to change business. And it was so encouraging when I saw now so many nice and I wouldn't say only nice, but really profound changes that are in our behavior and that are in the mindset of the business. And we have here COP26 after COP26, a small discussion with two very prominent ladies. And what we have noticed also during the COP, but also in this movement towards more resilient future, is that women leadership is coming under the spotlights. So I'm very happy to invite two ladies, Her Excellency, first, the ambassador, British ambassador to Slovenia, so Tiffany Sander, please join me. And afterwards, because we can have a kind of split, yeah, please. So warm welcome, Her Excellency. And I just wanted to say that we have another guest who is still there in the audience. So this is Tina Kubilšek. I will introduce her later on, who has been at COP as well. So, but let's start first with that. We have heard a lot about that, whether this is blah, blah, blah. That was what the young generation with Greta Thunberg was saying. But behind this blah, 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 there was a lot of serious, not only discussions, but also commitments. So can you say what is, according to you, the key takeaway of this COP26, actually?
Well, that's a big question to start with.
Yeah, but let's go straight to that.
First of all, thank you for having me here today to speak. And I feel like a little bit of a fraud because there's a number of people here who were actually at Glasgow, who were part of the negotiations, who made commitments themselves. But let me come back to your question. So what were the key successes? What were the key takeaways of COP? And I think above it all, the most strategic moves that were made, the most strategic context to all of this, was trying to keep 1.5 alive. So what I mean by that is limiting climate change to 1.5 degrees above pre-industrial levels. And that was at the core of COP, if you like. So did we succeed in doing that?
Yeah,
and that is what
question.
I think ultimately we are judged by. And on this, I think we can fairly say that we kept 1.5 alive, but that its pulse is weak. As Alok Sharma said, we still need to come back with more commitments. We still need to make more progress. So for me, COP26 was about the start of something rather than the finish, and it was about setting off on that journey. But there was some underpinning those moves on 1.5. There was some really important commitments that were made and progress that was made in specific areas. So if I pull out some of those very briefly. So our Prime Minister liked to characterize it by calling it coal, cash, cars and trees. So on coal, we saw some really significant moves to phase out coal, to make commitments to phase out coal and move away from that. And coal is the dirtiest of the fossil fuels. If we don't sign the death knell for coal, then we cannot keep 1.5 alive. So that was the first area where we saw a great deal of progress. Some really big users of coal moving away from it, and some important commitments in that area from Slovenia as well. We were delighted to see Slovenia join the Powering Past Coal Alliance at Glasgow. So that was the first under coal. Under cash, we needed the developed world to step up to the plate in terms of making new commitments to the developing world to help them mitigate climate change and also to help them adapt to the climate change that's already happening. And there were some important moves that were made in that area. There was a doubling of finance for adaptation in developing countries and moves towards that $100 billion a year commitment that we
A lot of money.
A lot of money. And that was just from governments. There were also huge moves made within the private sector and in terms of mobilizing private finance as well. So that was cash, if you like, coal, cash. Cars, we also saw some big moves in terms of moving towards zero-emission vehicles. We saw commitments from car makers and countries that represent about a third of the global market, making a commitment to phase out all dirty cars, if you like, to move to zero-emission vehicles by 2040. That's a big move, that's a big commitment. And then lastly, on trees, we saw 130 leaders sign up to end deforestation by 2030. That's a really big change, and that represents 90% of forests worldwide. And again, a big role for Slovenia there, and we were delighted that Slovenia joined that statement.
Yeah, because we are green in this sense as well,
Absolutely.
having so much woods here and forests.
Yes. I think the third most forested country in Europe.
Yeah, so really. And what you mentioned now is also interesting from the perspective, because we have you here, the UK perspective versus global perspective, because you hosted this event. So what is the feeling like? Was it successful in this sense of bringing people in these challenging times together and organizing this really tough discussions? So from UK shoes, to say so. Yeah. Okay.
Well, it was a tough time to do it, certainly, wasn't it, with COVID still affecting so many of our lives. And I think that there was a success there in actually making it happen, in bringing together so many leaders, so many countries. I think what I would say on COP26 and on tackling climate change is that this is a global problem. Climate change is a global problem. It is probably the most urgent, the most difficult, the most significant global problem that we face. And you can't tackle a global problem like that without bringing everyone together. Because in tackling climate change, there are some difficult decisions that have to be made by individual countries, difficult decisions by individual players, and you need to bring everyone together to build that momentum so that everyone steps up to the plate and says, we will do this, we will do this, we will do this. There are huge opportunities as well, but there are some short-term costs, and you need to bring people together to do that. You also, in tackling climate change, you need to make some global changes, some network changes, and you need that coming together. You need everyone to come together. For example, on new charging stations for zero-emission vehicles, that needs to happen everywhere. So you need everyone to come together and agree on those sorts of changes. So you asked, did we see a success on this as the UK globally? I don't think there's a huge difference. For us, for the UK, we wanted to deliver globally. This was not about the UK blowing its
but it was about being the host of this.
It was about being the host.
It's not easy.
I mean, we should ask those who were in Glasgow themselves, but I feel it was a success, and I feel that we generated that momentum to move forward. As I say, the start of a journey rather than the end of one, but we have kept that momentum going. We have created that global momentum.
And what you mentioned now, and we heard that also in the first video, how important it is to bring all stakeholders together. On one side, we have this public governance, and on the other, we have this so-called network governance. So everyone can participate and should participate. What is your overall feeling? Is this commitment there? Because we hear very often, we should do this, we shall think about this, but to do, really to have the list, like our guests in the video said, I did this. So how about that? Is there action on the ground?
So I think I would answer that in two ways. First of all, it's about creating the rules, and it's about holding countries to progress. So behind some of these sort of eye-catching commitments on things like zero-emission vehicles or coal, there was also some very important work that was done to finalize the Paris rulebook. And this was done down in the bowels of the building. This was the negotiations that happened late into the night. But actually creating those rules and creating that framework on a global level, as I say, this was not a couple of countries, this was not a couple of companies that were right at the forefront. This was absolutely global agreement by consensus. That happened. So those new rules have been put in place. That plumbing, if you like, is there in place. And that cannot be taken away. That will now move forward. But then beyond that, I would say it's actually about young people, it's about the public, it's about that shift in public opinion that we really need to make a change. It's about consumers as well, not just governments or producers. And I believe that commitment to change is there. I think we've turned a corner. I think the tipping point has been reached, and I think that momentum is now there.
Thank you. At this point, I think it's great to invite our distinguished speaker, so Tina Kobilšek, who is the head of delegation of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, Ministry of Environment and Spatial Planning, Republic of Slovenia. Tina, warm welcome. You would deserve a good rest. as I said, it was not only COP and Glasgow, it was much more. So first, if you can a little bit highlight what is happening behind the scene of such a big event for how long. It was not only 3 weeks in Glasgow, it was much more about negotiating process and so on. Can you briefly describe all that?
First of all, good morning to all of you also from my side. It's my pleasure being here. And indeed, fresh from Glasgow, basically. Being here, as you said, it hasn't been only 2 weeks of intense negotiations, but in fact, basically 2 years of preparations. Due to the COVID pandemic, last year COP did not take place, so it was postponed to this year, which made the preparations obviously longer. But I think the time that was used for the preparations was used very wisely from the COP presidency side, from the UK side. Which has used really lots of, from the diplomatic apparatus to the technical experts' work that were really, really preparing very hard in order to come to Glasgow with basically some sort of idea of where do we actually see the end game. And having 200 parties together assembled, obviously everyone coming from a different economic perspective, background, social background and so, and what you need at COP by the end is a consensus. And in order to come to this consensus, you need to have these good preparations. It was lots of virtual work, lots of different negotiations, although informal, but still very important work taking place. In the past year, there was lots of workshops, lots of different bilaterals, also again virtual, in a virtual context, but overall, I would say successful.
Yeah, but this orchestration, this is really a very complex thing. And how many topics you covered, actually? And this is one question, and the other refers to that, your feeling about Slovenia leading the presidency of EU and having a special role this year. So did we, as the country of just the right size, I wouldn't say small, use the opportunity and put it up us on the map? Are we more recognized after the COP?
So in terms of going first to the agendas, in fact, I would say there were 2 parts that were especially important in Glasgow. One is these negotiating agendas, and those were in fact 5, and on each of those agendas you had around 20 items. And the beginning of COP is actually sort of an agenda fight, because you first need to adopt the agendas. And not only we already had these draft agendas proposed, but then there were also different parties coming and trying to introduce new agenda items. So we had already, beginning of the COP actually, a few days earlier, where we had quite some extensive informal consultations led by the UK Uk Presidency on basically what would be the agenda in terms of these negotiating items agenda going forward. And it was some sort of miracle, to be honest, that the agenda was adopted very swiftly, because it also happened, and I was told that for some COPs, it was actually a discussion on the agenda that took place for 2 weeks.
So it was impossible to agree on the agenda.
Exactly. So already agreeing on the agenda is actually quite an achievement here. So this was made very, very rapidly, very swiftly, and I think this gave a very positive signal and a very positive atmosphere in the negotiating rooms. And then, apart from the negotiating rooms and all the informal consultations led by the UK Uk Presidency that I already mentioned, the technical work ongoing, there was also this, in the second week especially, the ministerial track of consultations and negotiations on the more political issues. There were also, of course, all the declarations that already Ambassador mentioned that were signed, that were agreed. So there was also lots of these, let's say, side events taking place. The political declarations that were discussed, and I think this was really a good opportunity. So everyone was basically put together: the civil society, the businesses, the youth. and of course the parties. And when it's
now to Slovenia, we are so interested in that, and it is also important for the business because often we say "made in Slovenia" doesn't mean anything, but let's see.
I mean, at this particular COP, Slovenia had a very particular role of holding the presidency of the EU Council, of the Council of the EU, which meant that basically Slovenia was internally coordinating the positions of the EU. And then externally, representing the EU at the negotiations, leading the bilateral meetings with groups of parties, but also with individual parties. So, for example, we had meetings with the US, China, Russia, Japan, and so on. And we were basically speaking on behalf of the EU for the entire conference. And of course, I mean, you're speaking as Slovenia on behalf of the EU, so I think this is also a great opportunity for Slovenia, for everyone being at COP, but not only then, also making the connections, extending the network, and then also using this network further. There are also pavilions at COP, so maybe next year we have our own pavilion at COP, and also make this, take this opportunity to also to maybe give a bit of a boost also to the business side, and maybe present the good practices that we have here in Slovenia.
Yeah, there are many. Yeah, Madam Ambassador, to refer to that, what would you say, because we are here with the business community, what is going to be different for the business sector because of the resolutions of COP26?
I think it's a big challenge that's been laid down to business to respond to what is clearly a new momentum from governments and from civil society for change. And I think that the smart businesses will look at that and see opportunity. The smart businesses will say, the world is moving in this direction. We want to be first movers. We want to be the companies that are spotting those opportunities, whether it's through developing new technologies, whether it's through developing new financial instruments, whether it's being ahead of the game in terms of infrastructure or products or consumers or markets. So for me, that would be, if I was sitting in the shoes of people out there today, I would be thinking, okay, there's some opportunities here. That's the way the wind's blowing. That's how I can deliver value for my company.
And you know, disruption is happening in every sector. So because of the climate change, and of course now we have this health crisis and everything. So how is Slovenia going to support this transformation towards more green, sustainable, circular business, now even with the commitments we gave at COP? So what can the companies expect?
I think there will be much more emphasis on this, indeed, this green transition in every sector, in every part of the economy, in fact. And I think this was also one of these aspects of the package that COP produced and was agreed at, that basically no one should be left behind. And I think also the division of the days at COP that we had, these thematic days, in terms of there was a thematic day focused on transport, on energy, on nature, on technology, and so on. I think this was also a very good. It showed how important it is that indeed all the different sectors are thinking about this and starting to think about the green transition. There was also an announcement from the UN Secretary General that there would be now a task force, in fact, created, or a special group of experts looking into the commitments of private companies also that announced they would be reaching net zero within a certain time. Basically creating also a bit more detailed definition and what exactly it means being net zero by 2050, for example. So I think there is much more emphasis on this private sphere as well, and I think it is inevitable that private and public goes hand in hand with this.
So even more dialogue more exchange of knowledge, expertise, and yes, everything what the business sector has learned and already embraced. And after events like COP26, I Googled a little bit and I found also a very nice Glasgow Climate Pact for Dummies. So if we conclude with that, because when we go back to our environments, it's always nice to be capable to say these are 3 key takeaways. COP26 means this and that for my environment. Yes. So I'm asking each of you now to help us translate this COP into the language for dummies and to say 3 things. You started nicely already, so maybe something what we can remember by heart and after this event bring into the business or other environments.
Okay, well, I would start by saying the first number 1 for your Glasgow Pact for Dummies would be keeping 1.5 alive. That is absolutely core and central to what happened at Glasgow. Second, I would say it's about this plumbing. It's about the Paris rule book. It's about getting all the rules right and having that structure in place. And then lastly, maybe it's a cheat, but I'm going to use my coal, cash, cars and trees and say those 4 areas. Watch what's happening in those 4 areas because those are the things which are really changing.
Okay, take notes. And now to Tina.
And I would say, I would mention 3 things. And I think these were also the priorities for the UK COP presidency. And one would be mitigation, as also mentioned, keeping this 1.5 alive. Mitigation meaning that there has to be less GHG emissions, and yeah, basically we need to aim towards the net zero in 2050. Adaptation to climate change. I think this will be more and more important as we know that some of the effects, unfortunately, cannot be circumvented anymore. So we have to adapt to those. So we will have to start working more towards the adaptation towards climate change. And the third one, finance. I think it always comes down to finance. So, so finance for mitigation actions, finance for adaptation actions, finance for loss and damage, which is already something that when you have been basically hit by a certain natural disaster or so, in order to re-establish your infrastructure. And so there will be not only billions needed, but trillions. So it's important to start aligning all the financial flows with the Paris Agreement. So yeah, this would be.
Money makes the world go round. This has not changed, but it is in our hands how to use this money wisely and not to spend it, but really to invest this money into green, sustainable, circular solutions. Thank you so much for this. And we have a special guest now. Barbara, are you going to announce him or how we go?
So unfortunately, Mr. Ian Gullard couldn't join us, but he sent us a video message from Scotland.
Hi, greetings Slovenia. I'm sorry that I'm not able to be with you in person. It would have been great to have had the opportunity to visit with you again, but nonetheless I'm delighted I can share a short message with you today. It's been an extraordinary 2 weeks here in Glasgow with COP26, where the eyes of the whole world were on our respective leaders charged with finding a way forward on tackling climate change, as the politicians, technocrats and climate activists packed up and headed home. There was very mixed feelings about what actually been achieved. A couple of takeaways from me, and I mean, clearly there was a lot of focus on reducing our dependency on fossil fuels, decarbonising our energy and transport systems, but as we know, that's only really 50% of the problem. The other 50% of emissions comes from the extraction, production, consumption and ultimately wasting of all the products and materials which we consume as a global society. So unfortunately that wasn't really much of the focus, and clearly the idea that where the circular economy fits into that in terms of making more of what we've already got and reducing the impact on virgin extraction and ultimately biodiversity loss, which is the second global crisis that we all face. So that unfortunately was not given the profile that I think it really deserved. Another thing that really didn't hit home was particularly the demand from the activists to change the system, not just the system, the linear system, which is causing all of the dire consequences that we now face in terms of climate change, but also the system that really excludes and the input and involvement of many parts of our global society, whether that's young people, poor people, or people from the global south, where the impacts on climate change have been felt more than anywhere. The other thing was big business was very much in the room, and that was to be welcomed, but I think there is also, again, a need for closer involvement and support for smaller business, in particular entrepreneurs. And finally, skills. I think clearly there's been focus on the need to upskill particular industries for the challenges ahead. But I think if we're serious about the change that's required and hitting the targets that we've set ourselves, then everybody needs to be upskilled. And so thank you, and we'll see you all soon.
Thank you very much, ladies. I think they deserve a round of applause. Would you please take your microphones?
Yeah.
So we heard what the summaries were of the climate change conference in Glasgow. Now let's shift our minds from Scotland to Slovenia, where the energy and transport sectors will have to change drastically in order to reach climate change goals. And it's my great pleasure to announce the second panel this morning, and I would like to invite on stage Luka Wisnauer, who is partner at Deloitte and also a member of our management board of the British-Slovenian Chamber of Commerce. Welcome, Luka.
Okay, thank you, Barbara. It is my pleasure to be standing here today to discuss this, I think, very important topic. So we had an all-female panel now, I think with some interesting thoughts discussed here. Now we're moving to the all-male part, because we'll have a panel with representatives from the corporate sector, also from the energy consulting sector, discussing what are the implications of Glasgow for the green energy transition of companies. So that will be discussed. We'll hear from the industry. But before that, I would like to invite to the stage His Excellency, Minister Jan Vrtovec, who was actually present at COP and who will be discussing some of these insights. So please. Okay, so Mr. Vrtovec, firstly, really big thanks for taking your time in the name of the organizers to participate here. We understand you have a very busy schedule, but that said, the topics that have been discussed in Glasgow, I think we will agree, are of paramount importance to all of us here. I mean, for us, for the future generations. So, in this respect, it would be really great or very insightful to hear from you. You were participating there actively. What were the main conclusions? And if I'm being a bit concrete, so you participated, you attended the Energy Day. As I understand, Slovenia also joined the Powering Past Coal Alliance initiative. So, we would like to understand, from your perspective, what were the main conclusions concerning energy, and what are the implications to the Slovenian environment?
Yeah, thank you, and good morning. So, thank you for organizing this important event, really important event, and thank you for inviting me. So, yeah, I'm Minister of Infrastructure, and this is a huge portfolio, So I'm responsible for energy sector, all energy sector, and also for transport, and we must manage it both. So, very important sectors, particularly in talking about decarbonization and decarbonization policy. So thank you very much once again, because this topic, green transition, Green Deal, these topics are really important, not just for right now, but also for future, for our children. I have two daughters, and I mentioned in Glasgow how important is green transition for our children. Really important. And all this is in our hand, so thank you very much once again. About COP in Glasgow. So yes, I was in Glasgow, and we had great discussion, great debate, very active debate with my fellow ministers, particularly about phase out of coal. And I am glad that also my European colleagues really understand and aware that phase out of coal is really necessary immediately. But this means next 15 years, okay? At the COP26, there was the Energy Day on 4th November, and Slovenia joined the Power in Past Coal Alliance and supported the statement on public support for the clean energy transition. So there were several initiatives, really several initiatives regarding coal phase out, which for some could have resulted in some confusion, yeah, also skepticism, yeah, as to what had been delivered, yeah, and most importantly, new commitments were given, new commitments, and this is the most importantly, and which this commitment represent major progress towards consigning coal to history, and this is important, also important for Slovenia. And our target is 2033. I represent also young generations, politicians, and I think that now is time. Now is this crucial time. Next, yeah, I also find extremely important commitment on halting all financing fossil fuel development overseas and diverting the spending to green energy. The United Kingdom, the United States, Canada, and also Germany were among the countries that signed this statement. And since the United States is among the top 5 G20 countries for international public finance for fossil fuels, their inclusion in the list is absolutely key for future. Absolutely key for future. And I understand that this is so huge signal, the last signal about that. So I also congratulate the United Kingdom for presidency. So thank you very much. Also you and your excellency. United Kingdom making very huge jobs under this COP. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So if we're being now a bit specific, so, you know, we've heard a lot of criticism that small steps were made, that it was not ambitious, that the conclusions were not, but on the other hand, we understand that commitments were made. So if we're being specific now here, for the Slovenian energy sector, for the infrastructure, for the companies, how do you see these conclusions relating to energy? What are the implications to the Slovenian industry and the energy infrastructure?
Yeah, particularly about phase out of coal. Slovenia is in a process of preparing a coal phase out strategy. The process started last summer, 2020, and has been really extremely intensive. And we have prepared expert analyses, conducted public consultations also, and worked with all relevant stakeholders, particularly in Velenje and Šaleška Valley. And we have right now 3 scenarios. First, 2033. I propose 2033, then 2038, and also 2042. 2042, okay? But we must understand that the coal power plant in Šoštanj and the coal mine Velenje should be in operation by 2054. In parallel, the draft coal phase out in strategy has been submitted to strategic environmental assessment. And finally, the most ambitious scenario, yes, is 2033. And currently, this draft strategy is in final conclusions with stakeholders, and I expect that in next few weeks, our government accepted 2033, this target. I mentioned that yesterday I talked also with Prime Minister and said to me, yeah, 2033 is the target. So I'm really happy, because you must know that phase out of coal is really extremely challenging, because we'll have to find an appropriate alternative to approximately 1/3 of power generation. 1/3 of power generation. And at the same time, we must also fully support economic structuring of cold regions, so also the Savia region, and make sure to leave no one behind. So how we replace 1/3 of power generation in Slovenia? So this is the reason why I gave energy permits for second nuclear unit in Krško. This is the reason, okay? Because we produce from thermo more than 27% of our energy mix. And yeah, we must put more and more money to renewables, private and public money, because I am sure that green transition is also opportunity for making business. Yeah, this is opportunity. But we must put also more public and, yes, particularly public money to green transition. But just renewables will not be enough, will not be enough. And this is the result why I gave energy permit for second block for nuclear power plant in Krško. And now we prepare anything also for environmental permits. And then I hope that 2033 we have second block in operation. So in next 30 years is a crucial time also for us, for our energy independence. Because we must achieve two goals. First, climate neutrality goals, and second, energy independent. And about energy independent, this is the last signal how important it is that we must put more and more money to renewables. This energy crisis right now is the last signal how important it is that we must promote in also renewables and nuclear, because nuclear is also zero emission. Okay.
Yeah, the 2033 seems very distant, but it's not. Yeah, so it's around the corner. Speaking from the perspective of
we must structure in all, we must structure in all country, all Šaleška countries. This is so huge challenge because there is a lot of emotions. So difficult job will be. Yeah.
Okay, and then lastly, I have a bit of a political question. So it's a lot of comments were reading in the media, at least, that there were huge lobbying groups at COP, representing the fossil fuel industry. Yeah? And how do you see that from the political perspective? How do you see, this clash between the industry demands and expectations of voters coming from this Glasgow event? Yeah, difficult one, but
Yeah, difficult one because I really understand industry. Yeah, I really understand industry. Industry is also our partner, and we need to understand each other and work together for our future. Work together for our future. But firstly, the industry usually has strongly negative connotation when it comes to fighting climate change. But this is just first step, okay? And especially fossil fuels industry. But indeed, they bear a large portion of responsibility also for future. And I really understand industry position, especially EU industry. Why? Because if you compare, for example, other industries, European industries respected rules and also climate goals more than other countries all over the world. And some countries produce, for example, 1 coal power plant per month. For example, China, 1 coal power plant per month. And this is also challenging for us, politicians, that we must make in future pressure to other countries for phasing out of coal. Europe will not be enough. Europe will not be enough. There is, for example, China and other countries in Asia produce more than 1 per month. So, nevertheless, industry is really important stakeholder and will not be able to attain ambitious goals without their full cooperation and support. And there are many companies also coming from fossil fuel industry that today represent key pioneers in green transition. Also in Slovenia, we have some companies. And I believe that this process will be only straightened in the time, and green transition is also, I mentioned, opportunity for making business, also for the same industry. And Thus, our role as politicians is to make sure that all stakeholders, including fossil fuel industry, and take their share of responsibility and fairly contribute to green transition. For example, we have state companies and manage very well about green transition, and I hope that also in the future will be the same. So finally, ladies and gentlemen, Your Excellency, finally, fighting climate change and addressing other global challenges is our common concern. So also for us politicians and also for industry, and our only path is to maintain integrity and stability of the natural system also for our future generation. So I have 2 daughters, and I'm a young politician, you know. So you know why I am Minister of Energy and also for Transport, because our future is in our hand. Thank you.
So thank you very much. I mean, I think these are very, very important conclusive remarks. So it is the future that you're holding, and you know, we hope that it will be bright. Yeah. So I would like to thank you by this. We now are moving to our next panel, which is with the industry, with the corporate sector, with the consultancy firms, who will give more light in not just what we need to do, but also where the opportunities are. So how are companies transitioning, you know, and how this, what has been discussed now, will be feeding into the corporate sector or is already feeding into the corporate sector. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much once again, and Your Excellency, thank you also for your job and for your work. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, as I said initially, we were supposed to have 3 panelists. Unfortunately, Ana Stanic from EA law firm could not make it, so last minute change. So we have, as I said, an all-male panel. So first I would like to invite Mr. Jože Bajuk, member of the management board of Petrol. So please. Okay, Jože, also thank you for attending this. The question now goes more, let's say, into the industry that I have, and yourself being responsible at Petrol for the energy division. Yeah. So and Petrol being basically Slovenia's largest energy company, which is committed to providing modern integrated energy solutions to its clients. So basically, that's as you put it in your mission statement on your webpage, you're committed to a low carbon society, and with providing these fully integrated solutions, you're on this path. So maybe if you can elaborate on this, how has Petrol's transformation been from being purely a fossil fuel or fossil energy provider to a integrated modern energy provider that has this low carbon commitment. So if you can describe this path, where you are and how you see your company 10, 20 years from now.
Thank you for question. Thank you for invitation. Good day, everybody. Basically, I have to start where Minister ended. Basically, of course, it's a challenge. We call it, I'm responsible for energy department, which is in Petrol, non-oil part of the business. And of course, for me, it's always a challenge talking about the green transition and so on with Petrol, which is the name of Petrol is Petrol. It's a red color. So, of course, it's a recognized, deeply recognized brand as an oil retailer or seller, oil and gasoline, of course. If I make a step out of the let's say Petrol as a corporation, as a company, a little bit into the philosophy. I think a few years ago there was one professor on one of the conferences in Slovenia saying that the quantity of the energy it's fixed. It's just the question how we use it. Yeah? So we believe in Petrol that in the future, in following period, I think that we believe that we will be taking part in much bigger diversification of the energy sources. Yes. So, because in all these debates, I think we are too many times always discussing who will win. Yeah? If the electric car will win the old school cars and so on. But I deeply believe that we will still have a lot of energy sources available, but just the mixture will be pretty different as it is today. Because thinking from the perspective, of course, I'm here somehow defending petrol as it is, but of course we have to be realistic. We are definitely motivated to follow the green transition, of course, because we have to answer on demand on the other side. So we don't see ourselves as a creator of the how to say usage of the energy on the other side, but definitely we have to adopt and we have to have in our portfolio answers for our customers. Of course, this will happen. It will happen much faster than it was happening for the last few years. But what we see in the future, we see bigger diversification. That's why we said in our strategy that we somehow changed a little bit of position, and we said, okay, we are not just oil and gas company. We are already providing free energy sources, 4 energy sources at the moment. This is oil and gas, oil and gasoline, oil gas, natural gas, and electricity. So we, in our strategy, we said that we will, in following years, add hydrogen, because this is something in line with the European policy, with the strategies behind, with incentives that also with the capital, with the money that is put in this field. So we deeply believe that through these energy sources we also see our own transition. So the mixture will be different in next 10 to 20 years. So I think what Minister mentioned, I think it's really important that what changed with the new technologies in past 10 to 20 years is that also production of especially in electro energy is not necessary anymore that government invest in these utilities in the production, but money is coming from the private sources. So today, especially in wind and solar part of the story, we see that pension fund, insurance company funds, private equity funds are participating in building utilities, in building production sources, and I think this is from the governmental perspective the biggest change. So it is not necessary that the government with its budget finance these projects, but government can focus on I think first on infrastructure and other incentives that changes that will happen faster than they used to in the past. So this is how we set the strategy. We are committed to energy transition. We prepared our strategy in 2 pillars. One is business as usual. This is the part which will be in the future much more burdened also with taxes, with the payment to ecological funds and so on. And so, of course, because the policy is going out of this part of the energy sources. And the other part, green part, we call it green part, will be, of course, taking part in bigger incentives. Mm-hmm. So we will, of course, still be focusing on both. We will, of course, try to do business as good as possible on both parts. But definitely will change are changing our way of thinking, where we look for new opportunities and setting new goals. Now, if I go a little bit also on this other part, what activities we do already, I think it's important to mention over and over again that Petrol is a regional company. So Petrol is not this part of this hard, let's call it hard infrastructure part of in energy sector. It's a regional company. Of course, traditionally was focused on a retail network, gas stations, but lately in last years, of course, also investing a lot into especially production of green electro energy. And just for your knowledge, in few next years, Petrol will have more assets out of Slovenia than in Slovenia, meaning that these are concrete investments, not just the value of the business, but meaning the concrete, the objects that we invested in.
Can I ask something here? I'm aware you're investing in various countries, Bosnia, Croatia, in green energy production. If you compare the Slovenian environment with these countries that I mentioned and Serbia, our region, how do you see the environment? Regulatory, political, what are is the environment favorable in Slovenia for companies living this energy transition, or do you have any, let's say, suggestions what could be improved where there are certain deficiencies?
Slovenia is extra favorable for small solar. This is, I think, it's comparable to Western Europe, especially Austria and Germany. But this is, let's say, where we made a lot of steps forward. I think also always is this example how big money Slovenia invested in this first wave of solar power plants with the big incentives, with the big subvention. I think the PPAs were made then with 450 euros per megawatt hour, which is tremendously high number at that time. Technology was also expensive, but this case is showing also that with incentives that were put in the solar technology, brought the prices of the solar technology that low that now it's completely normal to build a solar power plant and sell electricity on the free market without any additional incentives. So I always use this example as a positive incentive. The decision that we spent so much money in this first step, it was political decision. A pretty narrow group used this opportunity. This has to be said, but I think the result is good on this wider scale, and this technology is available, easy to use, and it's pretty well accepted especially for domestic, for small scale solar power plants. Of course, on the other side, Slovenia has limited space to build bigger solar power plants, so I don't see here really, I don't see here a big upside, because I think it's not acceptable that we will be building solar power plants on the agricultural terrains, maybe in some combination, with some technologies, but in general not. So this is plus, and minus is the wind technology, which technically in Slovenia is at the moment, I think there are a few projects running behind at early stage, but it's pretty tough to do anything on the short scale. But if I compare it to Croatia, it's uncomparable, basically comparable. In Croatia, the process is clear. Of course, there are some deviations. Also, there were some bad news on also some bad publicity on these projects in Croatia. But in general, the system is set, it's function, it's working. And I think what is, from my perspective, the most important is that also the grid operators already are participating in this game, and already are building and developing a new plan how to upgrade existing grid to even to create potential to build even more. To allow more renewable projects, especially on wind parts. So this is how it is. For Petrol, at the end of the day, we don't care. We don't care if we build the wind power plant in Croatia. The European system, legislative system, allows basically market with green energy. With the green certificate, with certificate of origin, which is technically possible to sell green energy to end consumer. Here in Petrol was funny. This was a year ago when we started to charge e-chargers for cars, and there was a question on the table, which of course it's completely clear if I look back, that we have to provide green energy for e-chargers. Because nobody was thinking about this earlier. So you are building the very expensive infrastructure, which will not be a positive business model for some years. But of course, it's completely clear that you have to charge it with green energy. Otherwise, it's everything
doesn't make sense.
Upside down. Yeah. So this was let's say as an example. So this is also an effort that we are doing at the moment. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, it's interesting to hear. That's why I asked. The environment as such is maybe not as friendly as it could be in Slovenia for renewables. So that's definitely a step to make forward. What you also mentioned is financing. So all these investments in green energy production infrastructure require investments. And our company, Deloitte, we're working a lot with clients around Europe. And let's say in Poland, this has become a huge market. Yeah? So basically, private funds investing into all kinds of renewables projects. Do you see this market developing also here? I mean, is there any, or do companies in Slovenia and our region have access to such funding?
To attract funds, you need the big projects. Yeah. I think this is the main obstacle at the moment in Slovenia. Slovenia is still focused on the state investments in energy production. I think that this block number 2 at NEC, it's for me it's a fact. I don't see here alternative, but this is a special story, as Minister said. This is special story, has a special different. But on renewables, I think it will be the biggest challenge will be scale of projects, because you have to know that terrains in natural geographical terrains in Croatia, Bosnia, Montenegro, Serbia allows bigger projects. And then you can really then attract capital and make all these structures and cope with competition. Competition is in northern Germany, in Spain, in Portugal. So I think this is a challenge. Yeah. This will be the challenge also for the future for Slovenia.
Okay, so Barbara is showing me here that we've run out of time. So thanks for this interesting discussion. I would like now to invite Bill Goldie. So he's coming from Redshaw Advisors. So please. Welcome on the stage. Okay, so Bill, welcome. On your website, it says that you're an award-winning carbon risk management and procurement firm. So can you explain in a succinct manner to the audience what does that mean? Yeah, so that we're, before I start asking questions. Yeah.
First of all, I'd like to say a big thank you to the British Slovenia Embassy, Your Excellency, and Barbara for the opportunity, not just to speak at your conference, but to get to visit your country. So thank you. So yeah, Redshaw Advisors was founded by Lewis Redshaw, so he puts the Redshaw into the advisors. Lewis is one of the pioneers of the carbon markets. He really believes that efficiently run and credible carbon markets can really help the business world to reach their goals. In 2014, he was working for Barclays Capital. A lot of the financial houses at that time were backing out of the carbon market. It wasn't always as attractive as it is at the moment, and Lewis took the opportunity to set up Redshaw Advisors. Personally, I run what they call the voluntary carbon market side. It doesn't feel as voluntary now as it was when that name was first given. We've recently rebranded as Planet Zero, and we help companies to understand the net zero pathway, understand, for example, the difference between net zero and carbon neutral, and why net zero is in the future, and it's very, very difficult to achieve today or tomorrow. But with a big emphasis on carbon markets and how they can operate in an efficient and in a way that can really add value to the fight to keep the 1.5 degrees from pre-industrial levels.
Okay, so maybe if you can explain to the audience why the companies actually need carbon risk management and procurement. Yeah, so that's, I understand, it's one of your core offerings. So if you can explain, what lies behind that? Yeah.
So, carbon markets kind of fall into two categories. You've got the compliance market, so you'd recognise the EU ETS. and that's a sort of 45% of the largest emitters who are complied to balance their emissions each year. And Redshaw Advisors work with over 400 such companies, helping them to manage that risk in an efficient manner. And the voluntary carbon market is really, and you know, there's a lot that we need to say that happened at COP26 in terms of getting approval for example, Article 6, which had been discussed since Paris in 2015, and it had taken 6 years to actually get some clarity in Glasgow, which will allow an efficient cross-border carbon markets to really start to make a difference. But effectively, when we talk about net zero or carbon neutral, I think everybody would agree, whether you agree with carbon markets as they run at the moment or not, that it's very difficult for any company to have zero emissions. And so being able to invest in projects elsewhere which actually avoid or remove carbon is not a bad thing. And you know, we spoke earlier, you mentioned the forestry, you know, and the deforestation. In fact, there was a report out this morning that Brazil's just had its worst year ever of deforestation. And actually from the UK, we can't, you know, we've cut down 87% of the trees in the UK, and we can't just expect these developing nations to keep their trees because we need that carbon sink without having a way of compensating them. And the voluntary carbon markets offers that compensation to those communities so that they don't need to cut down the trees and put on palm oil plants or farm the land. So there is, you know, run well and run efficiently, and so that, and with Article 6 coming over the line, that's definitely going to help. You know, investing in projects are really important. I mentioned there carbon removals. Carbon removal is quite a new sector. You know, the carbon market historically has been about avoiding another emission, investing in carbon credits from the renewable sector or from forest protection avoids an emission happening and can enable companies to balance their residual emissions and become carbon neutral. Become net zero, there's a number of changes, but one of the changes around your residual emissions is that you need to actually physically remove CO2 from the atmosphere. I think the scientists are saying that we need to be removing billions of tons of CO2 between now and 2050 to have any chance of achieving 1.5 degrees. It's not enough to just avoid. We're too far down the line now in terms of the CO2 already in the atmosphere. And so we help companies to, we find finance from the corporate sector and investment houses for projects that are removing CO2 from the atmosphere. And you know, that's a big challenge.
Yeah, definitely. So maybe if we move to the conclusions of COP26. So Jožek has indicated a few. You have also, between the lines, indicated a few. So from the, let's say, corporate perspective, what do you see are the key business opportunities coming out of the conclusion? So, you know,
sure.
Transition, you know, you mentioned now building, you know, plants that remove carbon. So where do you see the key for, you know, opportunities for the business sector?
Yeah, I mean, just as a prelude to answering that, I was at the COP in Glasgow. You can probably tell I'm from Glasgow originally, although moved away for like 100 years ago, but kept the accent. So I'll try and speak slowly so that you can understand what I'm saying. But I was actually very proud of Glasgow and very proud of the UK. I've been to a number of COP meetings in the past. I thought it was really well run, well organised. But the activists outside created a lot of the energy for the decision makers inside. I think there was a massive pressure, which I've never seen at other COPs. You know, someone mentioned the blah, blah, blah. You know, those banners were in our face every morning from we turned up and every night from we left. And they were leaving us in no doubt that they expected us to make progress and not just create hot air. So there was a number of great pledges made for businesses. 40% of the financial assets under management I think something like $140 trillion, have committed to being net zero by, so committed to the 1.5 degrees net zero by 2050. And that's great opportunities for businesses. All of those companies within those portfolios have now got to live up to that pledge. The deforestation pledge by 2030, I'm still personally looking for how that's going to work, because it's something that I feel very strongly about. I think the other thing from COP that really got to me was the heartfelt pleas from those who are suffering the most at the moment, those countries that it's almost too late for them. I heard one of the ministers from the Maldives asking us all at one meeting where the 400,000 of them are going to go. Are we all going to be happy to find them somewhere to live? And that was quite emotional. And I think the energy from outside and the energy from the countries that were suffering were really contributed to a lot of these pledges made. 30% cut in methane by 2030. So, going back to your question, I apologise for going off script a little bit, but I really wanted to get those points over. You can wait until it's compulsory, and then you lose all the goodwill, the competitive advantage. And actually, to try to become net zero closer to 2050 will be hugely more expensive, because every company understands supply and demand dynamics. And there's only going to be so much supply of carbon removal projects or the technologies that companies will require to decarbonise. The Science Based Targets Initiative have claimed the first standard for net zero. As you said, there's going to be a task force which are going to start looking at these claims. We had a webinar last week with a company that are working on climate mitigation for companies that are overstating their successes. And that's something we work with our companies. When I spoke earlier about understanding what carbon neutral means and what net zero means, a lot of companies unfortunately didn't understand and made claims that wouldn't hold up under scrutiny. So there's huge opportunities to take advantage of the energy that's been created globally and take a competitive advantage early. You won't get to net zero today or tomorrow, but you can have a sustainability pathway which takes care of your own emissions today on a carbon neutrality basis. You can say that you're managing your own emissions. That's a great starting point. Then you look at your supply chain, and then you look at how you transition to net zero. But, the Science Based Targets Initiative, they're saying that to become net zero, you have to decarbonise by at least 90 to 95%. That's a huge undertaking. And that's why 2050 is a target. But that doesn't mean that you do nothing between now and 2050. As I said, there's lots that can be done. And that, that creates energy for your stakeholders, for your staff, get people to be proud. We've seen all these CEOs talking earlier about what they're doing, and we work with a lot of SMEs because it shouldn't just be about the biggest emitters. Every emission counts. So we've created a lot of tools, calculators, guides, notebooks that we give away to SMEs so that they can get started, because the starting point is understanding what your baseline is today. What is your company emitting on their business as usual?
And do you see that this will also be a requirement in the future, a regulatory requirement that companies will need to report on this? I mean, is this something
undoubtedly, the UK government's already talking about this. So in the UK right now, as of from September this year, if you want to tender for a UK government contract of over 5 million, you need to have a net zero strategy in place. You don't need to be net zero, because as I alluded to, that's not going to be possible if you do it correctly. But you need to have that plan in place. And we had a webinar recently with the Minister for Small Businesses, Sir Martin Traynor, and Liz Bartley, the Commissioner for Small Businesses. And that 5 million will continue to decrease down to zero. And so if you want, they have something like 14 billion in contracts, government contracts in the UK. If you want to be one of those suppliers, you're going to have to start putting your strategies in place.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, yeah. So thank you both. Now we still have a few minutes, I think, for maybe some questions from the audience. So please, I think there's a lot of things that are outstanding in the future for all the businesses, from everybody in the business community. So please, invite you for questions. Yeah.
Yes, I have a question. My name is Vidunchina. Okay, should I? Yeah. Okay. My name is Vidunchina. I'm coming from the company Isoelektro from Maribor. We are an equipment producer for distribution and transmission companies. A lot of this has been said today about green energy and new energy sources, but we also believe that the optimization of power grids would also play an important role in the green challenge. And my question would be if you are aware that carbon emissions and energy consumption can be lowered with, for instance, the remote monitoring of safety systems incorporated in the existing power grids.
Yeah. Maybe yeah, this is one part of opportunity that we see for the future. I saw one Bloomberg study saying that globally investments in renewables are equal to investments to the grid. Yeah, because 10 years ago, also in Slovenia, it was communicated that wind power plants will kill the system. Yeah, because they are not flat. They produce a lot of distortions in the system. These days, today, nobody is saying this because investment started into upgrading the existing grids. Yeah? So this is the answer on the technical side of the story. But we call this flexibility, of course, that I think challenge is on the both parts, yes, because consumers are already paying quite a lot of money for flexibility. Yeah? So consumers, big industrial companies are already pretty motivated to do something on let's call it automation, or to control the process. Yeah? To produce as less distractions as possible to the grid, because it is charged back to them. Yeah? Because nobody is taking cost of this, so everything is reimbursed through the distribution fee and so on, system fee, transmission system fees and costs and so on. So this is definitely a part of the story. It's on the B2B part. These are let's say, bigger industrial objects, and it's also on the home level. We call it home. Yeah? Small solar power plant, heat pump, e-charger for car. And if you take a village, and if the village has 500 houses with the solar power plants, with e-chargers and so on, it will distract the network completely differently as they do now. When we all turn off the equipments, the electrical gadgets at 11 p.m. Yeah? So this will change, and I think the reaction is that we will have to upgrade these systems much more. We will have to automate them, and of course, with the goal to technically make it possible for electricity to run through the network. Eh? So this is, I think, for us, is this very important, and we see here also from our side quite a big business opportunity, because somebody will have to do it. Eh? Somebody will have to do it, and the cost is tremendously high. Yeah? I think this is also affect what is showing now on the market with the relatively high prices. It's also part of this result. It's hard to calculate. It's hard to say how is this affecting the price of the electricity, but cost, the monthly cost in the invoice is definitely already this cost is already implemented in this. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions? No. Okay, so then I would like to thank the panelists. So
thank you.
And I think they deserve a round of applause.
Thank you very much, gentlemen, for this panel discussion. It's also important to see that it's not only a discussion between government and big business, but also smaller companies such as Isoelektro and some other startups that are sitting here who are also very innovative in the future of climate change goals. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take a short break, and to let our online viewers know, we will be back here at 11 a.m. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, may I kindly ask you to get back to your seats, please. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, partners and members of the British Slovenian Chamber of Commerce. We heard some strong words in the last two panels of our climate change conference this morning, like keeping 1.5 degrees alive, adaptation towards climate change, net zero in 2050, coal, cars, cash, trees, finance, and skills for change. Now let's listen to the next panel, which is going to consist of business, where we can see how businesses will adapt to climate change goals. And it's with great pleasure that I introduced our next moderator, who will be leading the roundtable, and it is Ana Struna Bregar, who is the CEO of Sustainable Business Network Slovenia. Welcome.
Sincere guests, kindly welcome also from my side. And dear Barbara, thank you for the introduction, and thank you for inviting me to moderate this interesting panel with great speakers that will be following in a minute. This year, COP26 was definitely one of the main milestones in climate action, and many messages for the business and also many messages for each one of us. We heard many top-down approaches, ambitions and actions, but we will listen now to the bottom-up approaches, how business is approaching this climate action. One thing for sure is that climate change was for business very abstract concept for many decades. Now I think almost all the companies can say that they at least heard for the climate action. And we are glad that we heard today at the beginning also some very good examples of the companies that are going on the road, that are taking action and showing opportunities and best practice. So our first speaker today will be Ms. Marcela Klofutar, the owner and the manager of Villa Podvin and Hiša Linhart. So, Ms. Marcela, kindly welcome to the stage. So we heard messages from Glasgow, we heard messages from Uk Presidency, but we want to hear what were your expectations from COP, because I think every one of us was listening and was thinking about it.
Yes, I also had expectations. So my first thought was the world stopped due to the pandemic. So we have proven that the disease can lead us to connect, but also stop in order to protect people. So we believed that this was the introduction to the fast and determined slowdown of society due to climate change. So we're not satisfied with the conclusions of the conference. We expected at least one concrete, immediate, symbolic decision. For example, reducing the speed limit on motorways on 100 kilometers per hour. So this would mean fewer emissions and slower life. So symbolically, we should give one concrete message immediately. And I think it would be a really symbolic and really strong message.
Thank you. All the actions count and each small step. Our next speaker will be Mr. Thomas McGill, partner at PwC. Mr. McGill, what did you expect from COP26?
Yeah, first of all, thanks very much. It's an honor to be here today with all your esteemed guests. Look, I think one of the things that I was expecting was to see how the world can get faster to reach these net goals. But at the same time, you know, obviously the excitement of looking at new innovation and innovative tools and solutions that can drive and help reduce the impact that climate is having on both the planet and its people. But I think more importantly, you know, it's not just those solutions and tools, but we need to continue that, you know, the growth and prosperity of nations and people needs to be taken into account as well. So that's also very critical that you have a blend there.
Thank you. Thank you for being critical. We do need to be critical at this time. And our next speaker is Mr. John Locke, Vice President at Management Board of Nova KBM. Kindly welcome. Mr. Locke, what did you expect from COP?
Well, it's a good question. Maybe a little bit more than what was delivered, maybe more action on full phase out of coal rather than this phase down phase. But I think on balance, some big steps were taken, rule book commitments, funding commitments. I think key from my point of view is that people are held to account, governments, businesses, other groups, to the commitments that they made. Because in the past, similar commitments have been made which have not been delivered. And as I think was mentioned earlier, as Mr. Sharma said, you know, 1.5 is alive, but only just. Pulse is weak. So it's then commitments need to be delivered on.
Thank you. Yes, these are big commitments, and but this will mean a lot of burden for the companies. Unfortunately, our last speaker, Mr. Boštjan Černe from Trimo, could not be with us due to COVID issues in his family, so we have a plan B, and his video will be presented a little bit later. So we continue now with the questions for our speakers. And Ms. Marcela, you come from the food sector.
Yes.
Changing our food system is one of the most powerful things we can do to tackle climate change and build biodiversity, which we see that it's under big pressure. The current system doesn't work for everyone, and it especially doesn't work for the environment anymore. Yeah. So we produce food in a way that don't work in the long term. A huge amount of waste produced in the food system, and 10% of the world population is hungry. So you achieved a Green Star, Michelin Green Star which gives you an excellency for a sustainability restaurant.
Yes.
What is actually, how do you see how to build a better food system? What are new sustainable trends in net zero in restaurants? And what is your sustainable concept philosophy?
Thank you for questions. So, first of all, in general, we have a choice. We can continue to grow our system in linear, exploitative, extractive way, or we can move to a system that promotes biodiversity, regeneration, nutritious food, equity, and healthy people at the end. So this is in general. This is really difficult to build a new system, but we have to start. We know the business as usual is the problem, so we must change course through collaboration between all groups, between governments, NGOs, producers, consumers, founders. And together, if we want, then we can, with a lot of negotiations, with a lot of talk, build a new system which not only feeds us, but also puts on our plates colors and tastes. You know that we can be fed by also some pills without taste, but we want to enjoy life also in the future. And we have to cooperate among all of us if we want to still be alive in this planet. So this is the issue. But what can each of us do in everyday life? If we check our meals, we should eat 5 meals a day, 5 times a day. Do we plan our meals? Do we plan our meals in a healthy way? Where do we buy? Do we buy from local suppliers? Do we buy ecological, organically produced food? So these are small things which we have to put in our everyday life. Do we? Or we just go to supermarket, consume a lot of artificial food with a lot of plastic bags waste? So we need to slow down and to plan things in this field, because the food is really important. It's the most important, because it's also the cure for our body. So I really want to give you in your mind that we open our minds and we focus on what we eat. This is really important. But then, in the business, it's really difficult how to put the sustainability into model of business. We know we have employees, everybody has a different approach to sustainability, so we have to put something that we could measure. So in our company it's really important. For us, the sustainability means the way of life, and also in the company it has to be the way of life. So it means that we work today for the future. We have to have in the focus the future. And it's also important, not only zero waste and just food, but also how the team lives with dignity and develops personally. So we have to be human lives. I think sometimes we forget. So I asked myself how the sustainability can be systematically introduced in a company. So we know a lot of green certificates. We obtained one of them. This is a Green Key environmental certificate, and it helps us that we can systematically monitor sustainability indicators. So this is really important. So systematically, every day, you didn't do this, you have to do this. So it's really a big work. Meanwhile, the Green Michelin star, which we are really proud of it, it's a reward of our own sustainable system. So every Michelin says every green restaurant is different and works in its own unique way, but all make a difference to the world around them and act as a role model to all of us. So we in the destination, we are the role model for the whole destination. Our practices are really important. So we live responsibly, moderately, respectively, and above all connected to each other. This is the most important. So how are we connected in the destination? We involve surrounding farmers in our activities. So we buy organic, local, traditional and seasonal. These are 4 main points of buying ingredients, and then together with farmers, we revive forgotten dishes and ingredients and develop new products together, products of tradition for the future. So all products through focus of sustainability. And the farmers take a part of our local market. We have our own local market in the garden. It will be now transferred to Radolica Old Town, but they all have opportunity to show their products, and the guests can taste and can learn, because we have to learn for the future. We don't have enough knowledge. Then our system includes also vulnerable groups, so people with special needs make ceramics and paintings for us. And the most important, that all restaurants in Radolica are included in the Taste Radolca restaurants. So we work together. Now is the Taste Radolca month in November. So we all celebrate local ingredients, local food for the future. We help each other. We learn from each other. And the life in our community is really nice because we are all happy and connected. So this should be also the goal of all of us. And of course, we have to care for the future, and we have to involve students of the different schools to our system. And important, as I said, is knowledge. So we have our own, we run our own culinary school from children from 5 years and up, and also for adults. So we share our knowledge about everything regarding food, ingredients, organic with them. If they cook, they also eat, so they can eat natural, healthy food. This is important because too many parents came and said, no, our children eat just French fries. So this was our challenge. So we're connected in the destination. We buy locally, organically, and seasonally. We consume everything we buy. So zero waste is not zero taste, but it's full new taste. Because if we use everything from the fish, from other animals, from everything, we can be really creative and we can get new tastes and new dimensions of the food. And we're really proud that we have a Michelin star. And we do not offer still bottled water in our restaurant, but only tap water. So we really reduced a lot of glass because of this.
Bless.
So don't wait for politicians. Act on your own.
Congratulations. I think you need to. Thank you, and congratulations for this successful story, which is actually implementing all the ESG, so the governance, so you are addressing the sustainability goals, involving all the employees, the environmental aspects regarding energy, waste, materials, and also the social, so influence on the society and community. So you're really...
We're open. If you want to cooperate with us, please come.
We do, so thank you, and I think we will have a pleasure, Barbara, later to taste your green star.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. McGill, you come from a much bigger company, organization, and in your report to Net Zero, it's written that in 2020, the rate of global decarbonization was 2.5%. And the world needs to cut carbon intensity 5 times faster. Although there is a huge uptick momentum across the private sector, not all the businesses are on board yet. So what kind of help do they need? How to foster private sector focus on to shift from ambition to action? How to discover opportunities in green transition? What are the breakthroughs? And at least but not last, what are the key competencies and skills that we need for this transition?
Thank you, and I think, John, we're standing between the audience and this chef's cuisine, so we may have to be quick. But I think, Excellency, and obviously the Minister alluded to the fact that we have a huge challenge ahead of us, and I don't think we always grasp that massive challenge, and And I think what that means, I mean, in Slovenia we use, as you said, 1/3 of our energy supply comes from coal, and 80% of the world's energy is still through fossil fuels and the like. So, you know, this transformation will require, you know, what I see as a global rewiring of the economy. And that transformation not only means economies, but also society needs to rewire themselves and change the way they're doing things. And I think that's a key challenge in terms of how do we get there, and what do we need to do to get there. But, and I use the word collective because, you know, I know we've said that we've had COP26 and, you know, everybody's aligned, and as John mentioned, you know, we're phasing down. But I think, you know, if the world's not in union, and I think the key breakthrough to me will be when we collectively stand together and move forward as one. That to me will be seen as the breakthrough, which will make the difference. When it comes to, you know, what is deemed to be green, I think, you know, and we beat this drum a lot, it's around information. Because a lot of good decisions in terms of investments require reliable data. So information is important. And, you know, what needs to happen is, you know, is that accountability and that measurement around the metrics. Because if you don't hold people accountable, then that transparency, you know, we use the word greenwashing, and it's nice to have. But what transparency does, it drives behavior. So where people are held accountable, that information, be it reliable, be it, you know, complete, be it accurate, be it assured, but at the end of the day, it's something that you will trust. And when you as an investor trust in the information that you are able to then make decisions with your capital that obviously can make a difference, then I think we'll see a difference. But not just that, what's even more important is that information that is then used by the policyholders, by your employees and your customers, because they will use that information to make their decisions. And then you just hope that those decisions actually benefit you, because, you know, as they say, and it was mentioned earlier, the world revolves around money, but I think money will make the world cooler. And I think we maybe need to look at that. The other question you asked was around, and I'll leave maybe private sector to the last, but around competencies and skills. I don't think to be honest, you know, you hear a lot about the jobs of the future are not here yet. So the difficulty around the competency and the skills, I think it's the chicken and the egg. So I think a lot of change that will be driven through transformation, you know, renewables, you know, the type, and as the chef mentioned, if you look at the work that she's doing in the community and bringing the community together, that is creating those new jobs of the future. So I think a lot of it is connected. But I think if you go back to the private sector, it's critical, you know, we use the cliche, well, this is the best time, this is the right time, and it is. This is now the right time for the private sector to get involved, specifically in those strategic projects, which obviously can make a difference to help reduce the impact on climate. But as I mentioned earlier, it has to be part of growth and prosperity. You know, people have to live, you know, people need to feel there's a purpose in life. And what will drive this, it goes back to, you know, reporting around, you know, but also what business will need to do is to start shaping their strategy around climate risk and how that impacts their business. So what will then happen is as they go along this journey of shaping their strategy, they'll realize that, you know, we need to define objectives because we need to measure these metrics. We need to be held accountable. And in doing that, as they move along the journey, they'll realize, wait a minute, but we need to transform. How do we transform? And those businesses that transform and are more successful will be part of the new era of climate-related business.
Thank you, Mr. McGill. I think you pointed out some very interesting topics for our next speaker. So you mentioned information, transparency, climate risk, and that money will make the world cooler. So our next speaker comes from the bank. And Mr. Locke, the ESG principle and net zero commitments are now norm also for the banks. Banks also have a vital role in supporting the global transition to the real economy, to net zero emissions. So what are ESG expectations and demand from your owners, for your loan portfolio, investments, and your operations? And how is the bank engaged in emission reduction efforts of your clients? So how will you address this data?
Yeah, there's a few issues there. I think, as we said, this is a process or a challenge that involves all stakeholders. So if we start at the shareholder level, obviously we're owned in part by Apollo, which is an asset manager, which is a member or signed up to the impact principles which govern how it lends, invests and operates. And our second shareholder currently is EBRD, and obviously sustainable development has always been or has become kind of central to its actual mandate. Obviously we're in a transition of ownership at the moment if you look at our bank specifically, but we join a group with clearly stated objectives in the challenges relating to climate change. And I guess over time, or as and when that happens, we'll become aligned to them. I think second line here would be management of the bank. So as stewards, as it were, it's not just about our shareholders, but it's about our team. So, you know, over the last year or so, we have had a lot of discussions and taken actions with regard to how we want to operate as a bank and how we want to engage with our customers on these issues. So if I look at it from a governance point of view, we said as a team we need to operate a core, what we call Climate Change and Sustainability Committee. Each of the board members is a member of that. Each of us has specific streams and contributions to make to that to ensure that this becomes a whole of bank program, and that we embed it again in everything we do, because each of the components of what we do as a financial institution is impacted by this. So I could spend a little bit more time on this later on specific actions. Obviously, the bank's own emissions as a service provider, we've worked hard to reduce those over the last 3 or 4 years by more than a third. Of course, there is more that we can do, but obviously the leverage of finance comes through the impact we can have as a lender, and particularly as a system important lender here, and one that as and when relevant reg and antitrust things are settled, where we will become an even larger institution here. So, you know, obviously as a large institution, we work with pretty much the whole economy, and obviously included there are some of the larger emitters, whether in energy production, distribution, whether in metal, steel, aluminium production, whether in concrete, etc. So, but with that, what we can see, obviously, is each of those companies, larger and maybe less large, having its own program of how to adapt and reduce emissions, not just energy, but also better use of water, reduction of emission of other chemicals into atmosphere, etc. So today, even though we are working with those, and obviously if you look, when you come down to, okay, what's the greenhouse gas emissions for these companies, you know, you cannot, from my perspective, step away from those where there is a clear program that requires support, financial support, to deliver the objectives of each of those companies or each of those industrial sectors. Of course, Thomas alluded earlier, and there is a lot of discussion about, okay, quality of data, consistency of data that is published or available. You know, we have done surveys of what's available publicly or what companies publish, it's incomplete, inconsistent. There are, let's say, government or regulatory initiatives to standardize this. We welcome those. In the meantime, though, we have to use what we have. We have developed initial questionnaires to lead customers, big or smaller, to inform us of their strategies and how they and what their emissions are to the extent that they're measurable. We improve this question because for us it's important to be able to assess alongside the credit risk we take, what is the climate and transition risk we take.
So the companies will have to disclose much more information as they used to for assessing.
Well, I think under the or non-financial reporting directive, they will need to. We would encourage earlier exchange of data. Of course, we understand that the capacities of companies, maybe particularly mid and smaller ones, is not at the same level of the larger companies that are already under either self-required disclosure requirements. And that's why we look to embed into our lending process these assessments and ask customers to give us more data to enable us to assess that. We accept, okay, some best efforts basis here, but this is important for us. On the other side, we have also capacity to incentivize lending, and we do see this maybe not so much in Slovenia now. We obviously operate a little bit outside Slovenia as well, but what we see embedded in certain loans or bond documentation is, of course, incentives for borrowers to lower their cost of funding if they meet or exceed stated emissions targets.
So they will be awarded.
Yes, I mean, we have invested in one or two of these non-Slovene ones. Of course, when you look at the margin adjustment or reduction, it's not maybe so material today, but I think it starts to put a price on compliance with targets. I mean, to be honest, when we look at a huge range of industries, we're not in a position to understand the technical requirements or the details of or the scientific details behind. But we want to say, okay, if you meet those targets, then the cost of funding for you is lower. Of course, we're also reliant on a growing body of ratings and assessments by public. There are still a lot, and the consistency of measures could be and will be improved, but I think this will help put a better price on those that are leading and those that are following and those that are doing not much.
So probably this green finance will still be developing and a lot of discussion will be on this area. Now we will have a chance to listen to the video by Mr. Boštjan Černe, Head of Product of Development Trimo, how green transition is influencing their company, their business model, and who is responsible for the sustainability in their company. So, Technic, please.
We already see significant increase in requests related to net zero from our customers. This is related primarily to our products. Now, based on their requests, we supply them different certificates related to reducing environmental impact. For instance, environmental product declarations, which shows environmental impact of our product in whole life cycle, from raw material supply, production, use stage, and end of life stage and recycling. We supply them also information about the recycling content of our products, which are already made of recycled materials up to 56% and are recyclable up to 99% after end of their life cycle. We are working closely with our suppliers on these topics, and here we see biggest opportunities, risks. So, first opportunities. Till recently, our products have been made from materials which are produced in a conventional way. And the big opportunity here is to produce products which are made with reduced impact on the environment. For instance, so-called green steel, which is produced with less energy or is produced with cleaner energy. Or for instance, would capture carbon emissions during production for storage. Another opportunity is also increasing recycled content in all materials. These solutions are already available, but the quantities and availabilities are quite low, unfortunately, for now. So, a big risk is that we will not be able to get these materials in sufficient quantities. Next year, for instance, Trimo is planning to use up to 10% of such green materials. We would use more, but it's not available yet. So therefore, we need to get there, we need green or greener innovations, and these innovations need financial subsidies to be used in a broader way. New technologies, so these are already available, but again, not in a broader way yet. Of course, we need capacity building, we need advocacy, but we believe that the most important is that we need general understanding, not just by companies, but from everybody to act sustainable in everyday life. Trimo management from top down is responsible for sustainability issues, and that whole company is aligned with this. We communicate this regularly with all employees, guide them to act sustainable in everyday life. It is similar as it is with ensuring safety and health at work. Everybody needs to follow this. In the short, medium and long term, what we will do? Trimo is monitoring for several years these global initiatives to achieve goal net zero emissions of greenhouse gases by 2050. So in the short term, this is next year, we plan to commit to one of these global initiatives. Next year, we also plan that all our premium products will be made with green steel. The medium term, this is until 2025, all our products will be made with green steel. In the long term, we want to be front runner in the industry and achieve net zero goal significantly sooner than wider environment. In terms of ESG, so environmental, social and governance, I would like to say that in the beginning of this year, Trimo was for the first time assessed in terms of ESG. Among 75,000 globally assessed companies, Trimo's rating was better than 80% of all ratings, which is very good rating for the first assessment. So our plan for ESG for the next year is to further improve Trimo sustainability rating. Part of the assessment conclusions are also guidelines for improvements. We have already prepared and started implementing action plan these improvements.
Okay. Thank you very much. Now we have among our audience two green challengers, two startups for our dear guests. So Mr. Martin Vogreen from the company Amazing, the question is yours.
Thanks. My name is Martin. I come from the company Amazing, and my question. So we developed a DLT-based platform for investments into energy infrastructure. So what we want to do is for any type of shared facilities, we want users to be able to pay per use. So if they use electricity from renewable sources, we want them to just pay whatever they're using. And at the same time, for investors, we want them to have a clear accounting of all the users of this infrastructure that they invested in. And we currently operate 2 projects with over 30 devices, and we're working on some other projects as well. My question is for Thomas, and the question is, how do you see the role of private investments to achieve the goals of COP? And also, what do you think are some steps to encourage private investments into energy infrastructure and energy transition? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. I think, as I mentioned earlier, I think this is now the time for private to get involved, because collectively we can't do this alone, which is obviously a contradiction. Because, and we've seen around the world, when private gets involved, because we know government is, only has so much resources and in terms of capability. So without the help of private, a lot of initiatives never get off the ground. But I think what's critical for your success is to demonstrate that purpose, where you help society, you help the planet and its people. Because I think that's going to resonate more with people going forward in terms of why they would want to use your product. Because obviously growth and prosperity is important. But I think without that purpose and saving the planet, I think you would just become one of many others. And I think what's critical then, and it goes back to the reporting, is the story and the transparency you tell around your climate risk and how this will benefit society and the planet. That obviously will then, those investors that now believe that they want to do green investments, you will then be a key investor or investment that they will then want to take on board, because they can see the difference you will make.
Thank you. And our next challenger is Mr. Clement Furlan from Giro Mobility.
Hi. Yeah, we are GoGiro. We are a software company that actually enables mobility sharing, and we are working in Ljubljana and made this year already 20,000 drives in sharing community with bikes and the e-scooters. My observation of situation here is that things are not moving in the way that we would like. We are speaking a lot, not doing really too much. So the transportation is the area that we are addressing, and it's one of the, actually it's the only one that science shows no improvement whatsoever. So the CO2 emissions are still rising, maybe due to heavier vehicles, maybe due to gasoline engines. So we're speaking a lot, not much is happening. And we, as a guy from business, I always go to quick solutions. So basically, my idea to make a solution, for me, it's not acceptable in Ljubljana with technology that we have at this moment. In the last 5 years, there was a huge improvement in technology. It's not acceptable to see a car, a diesel engine car inside the Ljubljana, in the center. So this for me is not acceptable.
The question would be?
Yes, just a second. So basically, what I would like to for me, a solution would be, first, to get a subsidy from Ministry of Environment, and then a bank who would like to finance vehicles, because technology is here. We just want to put these two puzzles together, and I want to ask Mr. Locke, are you willing to help us with this?
Yeah, we will. We can discuss this. I think from the perspective of EV, a lot of these are issues are personal choices. As a bank, also, we reached a policy decision to switch our fleet and employee cars over time to EV, alongside provision of charging stations that enable people to charge. And we consider one or two other related issues to overcome any operational or objections to this, which may be practical. I mean, it's how far can you go with an electric vehicle, where are the charging stations, how long does it take to charge. All of this, I think, becomes more and more practical. It also requires investments. We heard Mr. Pajok earlier saying, okay, this charging infrastructure is important, but obviously it also has to be combined with adjustments to the grid. We are, coming back to Clement's point, you know, one of the larger vehicle leasing companies in the country. We do provide leases for for e-vehicles. We are interested in participating in schemes such as yours, but still they need to be economic. So the bank has need for its stakeholders to remain profitable, so we need to find a balance between subsidy, private sector investment, and revenue, because I think one of the things, as I also had a couple of minutes with Clement earlier, of course, one is subsidy, but people actually need to pay for the service of having a vehicle available per hour, per minute, per kilometre, whatever basis. I think on the wider issue you touch on about access, city access, transportation policy, it's a fair comment and challenge to the administrators of cities and highways. I mean, Marcella started here with a good observation. Why is there a need to drive 130 kilometres along highways in Slovenia when actually most people drive 140? Because if you're doing 130 in the outside lane, you are requested to move across. So I think there are a number of issues here. I think we will look at as a lender, a private sector lender at any scheme. And I think, you know, just also on a wider thing, I think, yes, I accept the blah, blah, blah from that is coming, but I think underneath, look, we work with a huge number of automotive suppliers in the country. It's what it's famous for, and all of them have huge programs connected with the end OEMs electrification requirements. So I wouldn't underestimate the volume of investment that's going into this transfer, and I do get or monitor quarter by quarter the production stats of these, actually the end OEMs which are driving it, partly regulation, but also partly personal choice. So each of us has to decide if we want to drive an electric vehicle, we want to use a scooter, or we want to use an e-bike that's chargeable by battery. It's we cannot be forced.
Thank you. Thank you. Any green questions for dear lady here?
I would just like to add maybe on this project that you should have more partners. Slovenian National Tourist Board is really active, and we promote tourism as active, sustainable, healthy. So if there would be more partners, target groups are locals and also tourists. So I think we should go, we said we have to make huge partners. So we should also always think who can be invited in the project.
Thank you, thank you. So to wrap up this part of the event, we saw many challenges that companies are facing, that will be facing, because we are on the road to net zero. And you have commitments. We also need still to raise the awareness, but the business ecosystem will definitely change in next 10 years. The final round of question is, how will your company look like in 2030?
Zero waste, full taste.
Great. Great. Mr. McGill?
Yes, I think, we definitely meet our commitments in terms of halving our emissions, becoming fully renewable, being stronger. But I think what's even more critical, especially in this time and age, is the resilience and safety of our people, and making sure that they're safe and our clients are safe.
Thank you. Mr. Luck?
I think as a lender, it's hard to say what will be in 2030, but for sure, I would like to think that the institution is still has full commitment to the transition to a lower carbon economy, and is making its contribution on its own and alongside its customer base to the achievement of these goals.
And maybe just one question that came up during this event to my mind. What's the message to our children? What's the message to your children? Okay, Mr. McGill?
Yeah, I think it's to find their purpose and be happy.
Great.
No, we are accountable to them. I mean, my kids are adults, but I think Minister Vertebret said it, you know, I mean, in the end, it's what you leave to your children and grandchildren, and if we have capacity and power to change that, we should use it.
Thank you.
Be connected in real life. This is my message.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all for being with us today, to sharing your thoughts, experiences. And dear audience, let's make a commitment for the end of this year. Let's reduce our impact for at least 10% next year. Please, everyone, start measuring your impact, calculate your CO2 this year, and let's meet next year on the event and see how much did we reduce. Barbara, thank you.
Thank you so much, Anna. Thank you so much to the panelists. I think they deserve a round of applause. And I really like those two words that John mentioned, we're accountable. So ladies and gentlemen, now let's go from business to pleasure. And I have a special guest star here with a Michelin star, Uroš Stefanin, who's going to join me and tell us what he prepared for us in the other room. And let me also mention that Uroš already cooked with a famous British chef, Alan Coxon, a couple of years ago. So Uroš, what have you prepared, and why is the meal going to be green and sustainable?
Hello, everyone. We prepare a really light meal for you. It's really local and really, really sustainable, because our restaurant is sustainable, and it's important for us because we work in this way still 10 years, and I mean it's the right way. But we prepare for you 2 plates. First dish is marinated trout with barley and soup skin, and then trout caviar. And the second place is red koran polenta trdinka, it's traditional Slovenian, with veal tongue and vegan sauce, and tepka pear. It's one Slovenian fusion.
I think I'm hungry already. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us, and thanks to all the panelists, and wishing you a great day.